Hi, Naomi here for a short little video for 8th Day Dawning. I thought we'd just take a look at that word giant and where it leads us to in our thinking, really. And what it really does is it fleshes out the truth and where our beginnings really came from, where we came from. I'm thinking of doing a very involved study for my other channel, Ruth Abbey. So actually what we're going to look at is Nimrod very briefly, and we're going to connect him to that word giant. Alright, so we were told that verse in Genesis 6 that in those days, I got it right down here, maybe that's where we'll begin with that verse, Genesis 6:4. It says there were giants in the earth in those days and also afterwards. That's what it states in that verse. Now in Genesis 10:8 it says this of Nimrod, alright? And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. So when we think of giants, we think of mighty ones, don't we? And so when we look at that word, it's Hebrew 13:68. And this is what that word means. It's an adjective. It's a strong, mighty. Now it says to compare the Arabic word here, and I got it wrote down. I can't pronounce it, of course. But what that Arabic word means when you use their version of the word, it means one who magnifies himself, behaves proudly, and this is what it says, a tyrant. That's interesting, isn't it? Who is bold and audacious. Alright, so it says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. So we'll say he began to become a tyrant in the earth. Why is that relevant? Because if we look at the word giant in relationship to mighty ones, what it says in Genesis 6:4, there were giants in the earth in those days and also afterwards. And if we pull that word giants up, it's strong Hebrew 53:03, and they go on about Nephilim, these giant men. But if you take the allegorical meaning which it gives in this word 53:03, guess what it means? Number one, it was the name of two peoples, one before the flood and one after the flood. So these giants continue to exist after the floods. Well, in what term are we looking at that in? Well, giant is from the word naphal, properly a feller. Oh, there's an interesting word we should look up. A bully or a tyrant, dash dash, giant. You know what I got in brackets for my own notes? The beast system. A bully, a tyrant, a very violent system put in place by the use of violence, by the use of being a mighty hunter in the land, right? And so what's the definition of a feller? Now this is going to come into play in my other study on my other channel, Ruth Abbey, when I get more involved in this study, because all of the information is there. When you determine to go in and look at this more in an allegorical terminology as opposed to the literal that the men of Baal and the men that tends to get on the pulpit likes to push. So when they say giant, they take it literal. It's large men, huge men, usually men. They never mention the feminine because, well, the feminine isn't required in the reproduction of life, I guess. It's all male. And you know, just for the record, because I actually have the time here, but I am going to give the definition of feller in a minute. I came up with a study, and many different studies that I do have actually inadvertently led me in this direction, and it's the Philosopher's Stone. And I pulled up a documentary on alchemy and all these great scientists in the 1600s that were looking at the Philosopher's Stone, and I got a real kick out of it. I would suggest go and watching some of these mighty scientific or alchemical minds of the day that people revered these men as highly wise and intelligent. Well, one of the scientists who actually deviated more from the idea of alchemy in a supernatural sense, he kind of leaned more to the scientific aspects, I guess, despite what I'm going to say. But he says he had took the sperm of a man, and he had put it in an airtight bottle, and he had stuck it in horse manure for 40 days, and then he fed it human blood for 40 days, and it turned into a person. Yeah, these were your wise men of science, of our scientific background, of that we're in pursuit of this philosopher's stone. Now, I'm sorry I got off, off of topic there, but these things lead you in the direction of truth. They really do. When you take a scrap from here and you take a scrap from there, because when you get understanding what they were actually looking at in the philosopher's stone, you can pull it up on Wikipedia, and you can pull up emerald tablet. I found something weird on that. That they just would not give me the answer to. And that was that they suspected, or they suggest, in the emerald tablets, Wikipedia, one sentence there threw me for a loop. It says, in the Latin, they say that the collection of philosophizing on this emerald tablet, that the collection came to be known as the Vulgate. And it's prefaced by saying it was Latin, right? Well, obvious. So I was like, well, what are they saying? The Latin Vulgate, because that's what it sounded like. And no matter how many times I punched the question in, no matter how many different ways I punched the question in, they would not give me an answer of what they meant by the Vulgate. They would not. But anyway, what I come to realize is the philosopher's stone is just another way of burying and covering the truth of the Old Testament of the cornerstone. That's all that is, right? Just they work to bury and bury and bury. And I find it interesting that male sperm had to be put in horse manure. That really was just entertainment all the way. But I would really suggest pulling it up if you like a laugh or two. And at the same time, when you study, you really are looking for key elements that really shows you how we came through history. And anyway, so the definition of feller here, one who or that which fells, knocks, or cuts down a machine for felling trees. Well, if anybody has been following my videos, you know we have brought in the forest of Lebanon and what the men did to that forest. We really brought it in a study from Psalm 74, where the men were likened to axemen, and they were they write the verse down, like men welding axes in a thicket of trees. So isn't it interesting that this word feller is it's really into that word giant, right? That we make such a big deal of giants roam the earth in those days, and they show you these huge skulls. Not saying that they weren't, but the allegorical term for it is a giant, a tyrant, somebody who wants to go in and to bully his way to become chief and ruler in the government. And this links us all right back to what Nimrod was doing. Now, of course, we know what Nimrod's house came to be called, don't we? Babylon. We know this. So this ought to be telling us that there's a clue to our past that exists today, known as the beast system in Revelations, that we ought to be looking at in a much deeper way than what we have been taught to look at it. We look at things in literal terms as opposed to looking at them in the allegorical terminology in the way in which I think we need to be studying the Word, because that's where we're going to find our deeper truths, all right? And so that's what I really wanted to look at, to compare that mighty one. He became a mighty one, Nimrod. And where was it? I wanted to, mighty one who magnifies himself and behaves proudly, a tyrant. And what does giant mean? From the fall, properly, a feller. He was taking out the government system at that time, the real government, the government of God. And he was cutting these trees of Lebanon down in your allegory. He was a bully, he was a tyrant, and he was looking to put the beginning of the beast system in play, which we know his house that he began to build was Babylon. And so I hope to take a deeper look at that, a more involved look at that. Probably run into an hour and a half anyway, at least, for the information that I have to go over, and then again, it may not be so long. But I do have a lot of information to get through. And, for those who doubts that, the information here is really there, I just have one thing to say about people who's continually putting out a new rapture date, a new rapture date, a new rapture date, and trying to validate it based on what the men of Baal have written. And I can tell you one thing, I believe that their presence is needed. They absolutely are testifying to the lie, is what their purpose is. Because every time a new due date comes due and goes by, it gains hopefully a larger understanding that we've got something wrong here. This is not right. This is not following through. They keep saying, and it looks right, all the information looks valid, and yet the date comes and it goes right on by. Because they have failed to factor in the feminine. So, that's my video. It's getting long. I thank any for pulling that up and watching it, and I hope you all have a blessed day. Thanks.